What is up, my friends and fellow busy bees? For those that don't know, it is now officially 4 years that I've been doing furniture makeovers, a reality that I can't quite comprehend because it truly feels like it was yesterday. And the fact that 4 years of my life have gone by since I first picked up that sander is pretty surreal. However, in other ways, it has been 4 very long years of learning and messing up and adapting my tools, my products, my processes, my strategies for doing these furniture makeovers and figuring out what works best and what are things that I can leave behind. There's so much information out there on the internet, on social media, and you can Google a question or look up a question and get so much contrary information to a very simple question that seems like it would have one specific answer. So it makes it really confusing when you're especially first learning how to do these furniture flips because you want a straight answer. You want someone to say, this is the way it is, this is what you should do. If you do it, you will succeed. And unfortunately, that's not the case because everybody has different approaches that they do and ways that they find to do these steps and different products that they prefer and honestly different standards and expectations for the product that they get as well, for better or worse. So I thought it would be interesting today to look back at products that I no longer purchase to use in my furniture flips for my business and let you know instead what I do or which product I use in lieu of that and why I prefer it over the other thing. So I have 6 items that I no longer purchase for my business that I want to walk you through today. And the first one is microfiber rollers. These were when I was hand painting all my pieces with brushes, the thing that everybody was recommending when I would look it up to get a smooth finish. They would say, use a microfiber roller, even with Fusion Mineral Paint, which was the paint that I was using at that time. Not only does Fusion sell microfiber rollers, but so many people said they used them, they got a great finish, super smooth, and so I got some and I used them. And the finish that I got was not smooth, to be honest. I didn't find that the paint was as self-leveling when I used it. It would kind of have that orange peel finish to it. And of course, I would always sand in between each coat, but regardless, the last coat would always have that finish to it. And so I didn't know if maybe I was using them wrong or if maybe people just thought that that was a normal finish to get. And maybe it is for some people, but I knew that I was getting a much smoother finish when I was hand painting. So I stopped using that for a while and I was like, you know what? Maybe I just hand paint. Maybe rollers aren't for me. But then, for whatever reason, I picked up a foam roller and I used that. I think maybe I purchased a multi-pack initially because I was getting Bin shellac primer, and because that's a shellac-based product, you can't clean it up with soap and water, so I just got a multi-pack of the foam rollers and I figured I would just throw it out after I used it. And although the Bin primer is very thin, I have found that it gave such a smooth finish with the foam roller that I was intrigued. And I tried it out with the paint on that same piece, and then I tried it out with the top coat on that same piece, and it was a smoother finish than I had gotten with the microfiber roller, and smoother than I was getting when I was hand painting the pieces. So I've been using them ever since. I find foam rollers last a really long time. Another thing that I had noticed with the microfiber rollers is I would clean them and let them dry and whatever, but then they kind of had a weird texture to them after the fact. Kind of like when you have those fake Sherpa sweaters and then you wash them. You know how they get kind of just like, not pilly, but they just have a different texture to them. They're a little bit like matted in a way. And they didn't feel as soft and as good as new. However, when I would clean the foam rollers and let those dry out thoroughly, although they took a little bit longer to dry because the foam is thicker, and so to get all of that water out and then let it dry thoroughly, it took a little bit longer, but it would be good as new, nice and clean, and I could use those foam rollers for like, I don't know, maybe 6 uses or so before they started to show signs of wear. And in true transparency, they probably would last much longer than that, but I tend to scrape the edge of the foam roller on like the lip of the product that I'm dipping it into, because I don't usually pour the product into a separate pan to then pick it up on the roller. I usually just dip it right into the product itself. I know it's bad. It probably dries out the product quicker doing that, but it's what I do. And so I would always scrape the end of the foam roller on the lip of that container just to make sure that it wasn't going to be dripping all over the place when I went to put the roller onto the furniture piece. And so eventually when you do that, it just kind of like starts to eat away at that tip, and it eventually breaks off, and then there's little pieces of foam that start to break off. So if I wasn't doing that and being ruthless with it, it would probably last much, much longer. But it's like, I don't know, $12 for a pack of like 10. So from a supplies cost perspective, very economical. And I found that the microfiber rollers cost a little bit more as well. So I love the foam rollers. I don't see a need to use microfiber rollers anymore when I'm painting furniture. If you're someone that is using rollers, they're microfiber, and you don't quite love the finish, but you think that all rollers are the same, I would recommend picking up a foam roller and giving it a try. The second product I no longer purchase for my business is painter's tape. I had been using painter's tape for various uses, the most common of which being to tape off edges around the sides of drawers if I was going to be painting the drawers and I wanted to make sure I didn't get it on the drawer sides, or marking off a line inside of a dresser body if there wasn't kind of an already natural break in the materials that I would paint up to. I would create that fake line with painter's tape. Also taping off things like the legs if you're going to be painting the legs a different color on a piece. And also if you're going to be painting lines on a piece and doing some sort of geometric pattern or stuff like that, I would be using painter's tape for that. And I do still do all of those same things. However, I use frog tape instead. It's a little bit more pricey, but it is so worth the upgrade. Not only can you get it in thicker or thinner versions, but they also have different levels of adhesion that you can purchase if you want it to be super sticky, or if you want it to be able to peel off easily without affecting the finish underneath. They've thought of those things. And regardless of which adhesion you choose, I find compared to a painter's tape that frog tape sticks so much better. I don't know what it is about the glue that they use, but it is so crisp. And I also think that the tape itself is a little bit thicker and holds up a bit better. So when you're peeling the tape off, it's very rare that with frog tape, when you're pulling it, it will rip and you'll have to like start peeling it up again in the other spot and then continue peeling it. It just comes off in one swift motion, which for the marginal price difference is worth it for me to avoid any annoyance in my day. I'm intentional with my use of it, so I don't go through a roll of it super quickly typically, especially when you're looking for a very crisp line without bleed through, like when you're doing those geometric patterns. I would highly recommend doing frog tape. It also doesn't hurt to, once you put the tape on, do the base color as the first layer and then go in with whatever highlighting color you're going to be using, because that will ensure that there's absolutely no bleed through. That's a good second level of safety measure to implement in there. But regardless, frog tape is where it's at. Don't bother wasting your time with painter's tape. Even when I'm painting my rooms in my house now, I use frog tape instead of painter's tape because it's just so much better. It's a couple dollars extra, but it's worth it. Trust me on that one. Another thing that I no longer purchase for my furniture refinishing business is every paintbrush that somebody recommends to me. Because if you haven't noticed, everyone seems to have a different brush that's their favorite. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But when I first started out, I wanted like all of them. I find that I don't use that many of them. I have quite a few paintbrushes now that I've acquired through purchasing them myself or getting them as gifts or being gifted them from brands. And I don't even hand paint all that often anymore, but when I do, or when I'm painting like the details on pieces, for example, if a roller can't get in there, I have very few that I gravitate towards because you kind of figure out what works best for you. You're going to find those ones that are tried and true for you, that feel comfortable in your hand, because that's a big part of it too, and why some things feel good for others when for other people it might not be quite as comfortable. An example of this is the Zebra Palm Pro. Everyone talks about how comfortable it is in your hand, but for me, it's a little bit too thin actually. So when I use it for an extended period of time, I find that my wrist and like the bottom of my forearm, I guess, gets kind of crampy. I think I low-key have like the beginning of arthritis, like tendinitis, perhaps, which means I'm especially choosy with the paintbrushes that I use. So it needs to feel comfortable in your hand and the way that you like to hold it. I am always looking for a paintbrush that doesn't shed, because that's annoying to have to pick it out of your finish or let it dry and then pull it out of the finish, sand it down, and then put the next coat on. And you also want a paintbrush that is going to be ideally made for the purpose that you're using it for. So if I'm using a chalk paintbrush, it's going to be a bigger head that's more densely compact, but they're going to be pliable fibers so that I can really bend them when I'm working the chalk paint or wax into the finish. There are the little shorty brushes like the Palm Pro by Zebra, or the Wooster Shorty or Shortcut brush, which is one that I really like. That is rubber handle, short handle, similar to the Palm Pro, so it can fit into hard to reach areas. And it's narrow, but I find it holds in my hand a little bit nicer. I also have some artist brushes from Michaels that I've picked up over the years that work really well for certain shapes and densities that I need the paint to be. So you're going to find what works for you. Unfortunately, you'll probably need to spend some money when doing so, because you're not going to know until you use it yourself and see if you like it or not. But once you find a couple that are good for the uses that you actually use brushes for, just stick with those. You may need to repurchase them after years and years of use, but if you're maintaining them properly, you're cleaning them properly, you're letting them dry properly, then you should get many years of use out of those products if they are of decent quality. So stick with those and don't feel the need to buy the latest and greatest, because chances are it won't get that much use from you and you're gonna potentially spend a lot of money in doing so, because there are some very affordable brushes, but there are some that are like nearly $100, which is absolutely nuts in my opinion. You do not need to spend that much at all. Another item that I no longer purchase for my business are screws. And this is because I am a little frugal, hoarding queen who hangs on to any little screw that I come across. And sometimes they are organized, sometimes they're not. I have hardware screws that I keep from pieces that I am switching out the hardware on. I have extra hardware screws that come with pieces of hardware that I've ordered to put onto the furniture piece that I'm making over. I hang on to spare screws that you find in the drawers when you get a piece of furniture in, or you pull the drawers out and there's screws hanging around in the back that just have been flying around for years. I hang on to all of those little odds and bobs because eventually it may just be the thing that you're looking for, and instead of having to go to the hardware store to purchase a big pack of them, you will be able to find what you need at your house, or at a minimum, you'll have something that's close enough that you can maybe add a couple washers to make it the right length or something like that. So if you are not yet hanging on to those little odds and bobs and you're just tossing them, hang on to them. Even just get like some sort of container. Next time you empty out a yogurt container in the fridge, hang on to it, write screws on top, put it beside your workbench, and then any little random screw, nut, bolt, clasp, hinge, anything that you are not needing, or you're taking off of the piece that you're working on, or you find on the ground, because sometimes things will just appear on the ground, you don't know where they came from. If it doesn't belong to a piece that you're currently working on, or that piece no longer needs it, just throw it in there, and then when you need something like that, empty out that container, take a peek, and see if anything will work. 9 times out of 10, I guarantee it will. The next item that I no longer purchase for my furniture refinishing business are foam brushes. And these are typically a pretty economical thing to use. You can get them at the dollar store or at Michael's in like variety packs of maybe like 5 to 10 of them, sometimes more, and they're pretty cost effective. But in my opinion, they're cost effective because they're so shit. They don't last. I don't like them. They don't feel nice in my hand. I don't feel like I have control. They fall apart. I don't know if I'm just super aggressive when I'm applying my products, but I started out using them and I've used them for different purposes and I've never preferred them over alternatives. So although I used to buy them and just use them because everybody kind of seemed to be using them and I was like, I guess this is what you use. Eventually I was like, I'm just going to try things out for myself and see what works, and I much prefer what I now do. Because I find, although I like foam rollers, the foam brushes, they're not as structurally sound, and I've gotten the ones that have the plastic handles with the kind of like removable heads that slide onto it. I've gotten the ones that are the heads that are glued onto a wood stick, and I just feel like I probably do push down too hard when I'm using them. I'm someone that like has a toothbrush that looks like it's been absolutely mangled, so I know I'm like doing more than I need to. But it's been 4 years and that hasn't changed at all. So like I'm gonna switch up the product to make sure that it works for me, because obviously I'm not going in with a lighter hand anytime soon. So there's 3 uses that I've seen people use these foam brushes for. The first being to apply top coat. Obviously there's so many different ways that you can apply top coat. I don't think that a foam brush is one that's ever really going to give the best finish. Again, because I find that they just like, you don't have a lot of control. They don't have an even distribution of the product. If you are using them, make sure that you're going from one end to the other and you're not starting and stopping along the way, or else you'll definitely be able to see that when you look at it at an angle once it's dried. But for me, I prefer a foam roller when I'm putting a top coat like a polyurethane on. I've also used brushes in the past. There's a zebra brush, the 4-inch chiseled, I believe it's called, or the fan brush I've used to top coat in the past. I've also used those big circular sponges to apply top coat, and they've all looked much better than a foam brush ever has looked, in my personal opinion. Another option is with primer, and this is kind of what I was using them most commonly for, especially for bin, because like I mentioned, it's shellac based, and so I would just want to toss the tool afterwards, and if it's a foam brush, it's super cheap. I didn't feel too bad about throwing it out instead of trying to salvage it and clean it up. But as I mentioned, when I discovered the foam rollers, they worked just as well, if not better. I could get it on there much quicker compared to a foam brush, and it was a much smoother finish, so I wasn't having to do a whole lot of sanding afterwards to even out the finish and get it nice and smooth before going in with the paint afterwards. Or I just use like a really cheap chip brush that I have that I'll get at the dollar store, and I'll apply it with that. Typically that results in a little bit more texture, but again, I just go through and sand that away if I don't have any foam rollers on hand, for example. Or if it's just like a piece with a lot of details as well, where using a foam roller would only get a small portion of it and then I would have to use a chip brush anyways, I'll just use a chip brush for the whole piece to avoid having to throw away 2 tools. But again, because of the uneven distribution of product that I find, especially with bin, because it's such a thin consistency, I find the foam brush can make it pool into like the little details on pieces if there's a lot of carvings and stuff like that. So I would use a foam roller instead. And then I've also seen people use the foam brushes to apply stain. And yet again, I don't think there is an even distribution of product. I use oil-based stains for the most part. The water-based stain, I feel like it would make it look especially streaky, but I don't think I've personally done that, but just based on using the products, I kind of feel like that's what would happen. But I like to just apply the stain with a blue shop towel and then throw it out after. You can control how much product you're getting onto the towel. You can put it on, and if there's too much on there, you can quickly wipe it away. You can deepen that color a little bit while you're there. Like, it gives you so much flexibility, and then you can use that same product to wipe away any excess once it's sat for a little while. And that's just what I prefer to use instead of a foam brush. But if you like them, go hard. But if you've been like, I don't really feel like this is the best kind of finish, maybe try out some of those options and see if they work better for you. As always, make sure that you're cost comparing and looking, for example, if you're getting a foam roller, check a few different places, see how much they cost. Try and buy in bulk whenever possible once you know that a product is going to work well for you, because typically the cost per unit will be less expensive, and or wait until things go on sale and then stock up then, because we want to keep our supply costs down so that we can keep our profit margins and the money in our pocket up. The last thing that I no longer purchase for my furniture painting and refinishing business is the latest and greatest paint that is on the market. And if you spend a lot of time on social media, this may be something that appeals to you to do as well, because there's so many different products that are popping up all the time, especially with furniture paint specifically. I've seen so many brands start over the last few years, which is amazing. Some of them are probably great products that are filling a hole in the market, especially when furniture painters are the ones creating these brands, because they know what they're looking for in a product and the colors that are missing in the market and things like that. But for me, once I found a paint brand that I liked, that I trusted, that I had a good relationship with, that I knew the outcome of the product and how it would look, then I was set and I stopped seeking other options. For me, it's Fusion Mineral Paint. You've heard me talk about it on the podcast many times. I'm an affiliate with them, which means that I do have a code if you're ever interested in any of their products on their site. It's always linked in the show notes of every podcast episode. But I sought out that affiliate relationship once I used, enjoyed, and determined that I was sticking with Fusion for my business. Because for me, there's no reason to look elsewhere. There's such a big color line that they offer. And if you purchase their fan deck as well, it also has custom color mixes that you can create, and it will show you the recipe for creating that. Like, there's a greeny taupe, and so you use 50% bayberry and 50% Algonquin, and it will give you this color. So for the large majority of my pieces, certainly the ones that I'm doing that I'm listing for sale, and for most of my custom work, I'm using Fusion. There are times when a client is wanting me to paint a piece to match something else in their home, or we're trying to color match and maybe Fusion doesn't have one that's exactly similar to the color that the client already has. In that case, I'll often use Behr or sometimes Benjamin Moore in different brands. But for the most part, when I have the option to, I'm using Fusion because I know how it performs. I know the finish that it will have. I can speak to its durability and how it will hold up over time. And these are things that a client that's coming to me or that's purchasing a product from me is going to want to know that it has my seal of approval of someone who does this work and understands what the furniture will be going through, in its lifetime of the different wear and tear that it's going to get. So that's why I don't try out a whole lot of new product lines. There are times when I'll be interested in a product or a brand might send me product to try out, and I'm always going to try it, especially if it just shows up at my doorstep. I'm not going to let that go to waste. But I wouldn't ever use it for the first time for custom work because, especially if we have a short timeline, I don't want to risk that. And if it's just a piece that I'm working on for myself, worst case scenario, if it doesn't perform the way I want it to, if we run into a hiccup, I can always take it back and start over. But I'm going to do that on my own time and at my own expense when I'm trying those things out. Or maybe it's for a video and I'm just wanting to show you guys how the product works or how it compares to something else. So it doesn't need to be Fusion necessarily. Obviously, I love it. I recommend it. But find a paint that you like the finish of, that works well for the style that you do, that you have good control over and can get a good product from, and that has a color offering that works for you and, the styles that you do, and then stick with that for the most part. You'll get that consistency, you'll know what to expect, and if you do custom work, then you will be able to speak to that for your clients, and you'll avoid it ever being a guessing game when you're going into a project, because there's already so many factors that can pop up during a makeover based on the structural integrity and repairs that may be needed, based on the material that you may uncover when you strip back the old finish. And so, if nothing else, you want the consistent thing to be the products that you're using and that you know can perform. And then if you find that brand, look into whether or not they have a fan deck available with all of their colors that are available. It's great because they're often really true to color. So when you're trying to figure out a color to use, or maybe colors that coordinate well with each other if you're doing a two-toned piece, that's really helpful to have on hand, and especially so if they have those custom mixes that you can create using the colors that they offer, like I mentioned Fusion does. That's been so helpful, and for custom work has been a really good visual thing that I can pull out when I have a client there. We can look at it relative to different wood tones, we can look at it in different light, so a client can really see it with their own eyes and see the color that it would be and how it would look, which is easier to do than sending a photo online of a piece that somebody did that may or may not have been edited, may or may not look a little bit different based on the other colors in the photo and things like that. And when you have that consistent brand that you use, as long as you're taking pictures and videos of your pieces, you can also then pull those up for clients that are interested in custom work. If maybe they're looking for like a navy blue and you're like, okay, there's a couple options that come to mind. Here's some pieces that I've done in this color, and here's some pieces I've done in this color, so they can see, if it has gold hardware, if it has silver hardware, if it has a dark wood top, if it has a whitewash top, and they can see those color and those color combinations and make an informed decision of what they want for their own piece. Provides so much flexibility, and again, it shows that you know your shit, you're familiar with these products, and they're going to trust in those products because they can see that you've been using them for a long time as well. And something you may not know about me, I love little motivational messages. They get me fired up, and I keep a running list of ones that are especially catchy or speak to me in the Notes app on my phone. So I end every podcast episode with one that I've noted down over the years in hopes that you leave our time here each week feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on whatever comes your way this week. So this week's Mel's motivational message is, I never learned from a man who agreed with me. It is so important to listen to other people's perspectives and opinions. Ideally, they're going to be opinions and perspectives that are provided in a friendly, non-combative way, a skill that is very quickly dying in the age of social media, I feel. Humanity is becoming pretty fucking ruthless. But for those that are able to provide opposing viewpoints or bring forward information that they have learned in a helpful, non-criticizing, supportive, encouraging way, you're going to learn a lot from those people. And even from the dickheads that are bringing forward actual helpful information, but maybe in a not so nice way, we can learn from them too. We'll just be a little bit more salty about it. But it's important to some extent to listen to those people and to consider whether or not what they're proposing or what they're saying is an option or a thing, an approach, a process that might be worthwhile trying out for you. Because ultimately that's how we adapt and we learn as we move forward, whether we're talking about doing furniture makeovers or just our approach to life in general. You don't necessarily want to surround yourself with yes men, right? Because anybody that is blindly agreeing with you and supporting you isn't really helping you grow, because as smart and wonderful and amazing as I am sure you are, I know you are also human, and so probably you don't know everything there is to know in this world. You probably don't have the perfect approach to or outlook on life or know all of the knowledge there is to know in this world. I know that I don't. So when I come across in whatever format those opposing viewpoints and perspectives, I always do my best to take a beat and consider them. Sometimes maybe you need to wait and approach them or go back to them when you're in the right headspace for it. Not to say that all day, every day, you should be integrating that into your life, because that can be exhausting. But finding ways to integrate this into your day to day and just having that critical eye and second guessing your assumptions and the things that you think you know to be true. Oftentimes, depending on the topic that we're talking about, there may be something that you learned that was true in that moment, but maybe there's new information that's been uncovered. I'm thinking more in the science or health and wellness fields. There are new studies and experiments being done every day, and so there's new information that comes to the public, and having that learning mindset and being open to having your assumptions challenged a little bit is a really healthy thing to learn to do, and to not feel attacked or like somebody is being critical towards you when that happens, but just being really objective and looking at the facts and questioning it. Is this something that's worth my time and looking at? Might I be wrong? Or might I have an outdated viewpoint on this thing? And being willing to adapt in that way. It's the only way that I've discovered these new products and processes that I use in my business, by taking information that I've seen from others or looking at the things that people do and integrating it or not, right? Saying like, is that something that is working for me? Or if it isn't, is there something else that I can do that might work better for me? Having that critical eye and being willing to kind of go against the grain a little bit is the only way that we will adapt and grow in this life. So I encourage you to keep that critical filter, critical in a positive way, filter at top of mind as you move through this week, and ask yourself whether these things that we accept without second thought are things that maybe we need to take a beat and reevaluate every now and then, because you may be surprised at how much goes through your subconscious or your conscious thoughts and just how long they've been there. All right, that's it for now. I appreciate your time, and I will catch you guys next week.